Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show that covers all things marketing. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast gives you the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. Whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand, you've come to the right place. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast starts now.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and on tonight's episode, I am going to share with you some tips and tricks on how to beat Instagram's algorithm. So obviously, we are all on Instagram. If you are not on Instagram and you're in the marketing world, then I would love to ask you the question as to why. Even if you don't think your company or your brand fits in the Instagram world, I just think you've been given wrong information, because to be honest and to be frank, every brand and every company should be on Instagram at this point. It is the best way to gain a following and have customers who are loyal, not only to your product, but to your company, and have customers and a foundation of people who are dedicated to shopping at your company and your organization and working with you. So Instagram is definitely a tool in our marketing tool belt, but it does come with a few extra tools that sort of dangle off of it. Obviously, we have talked about in previous podcast episodes certain ways you can improve your Instagram, certain ways you can start your Instagram, but at the end of it all, at the end all be all when it comes to Instagram, one of the biggest issues I see people struggle with, I see my clients struggle with, is that they can't beat that algorithm. So for those of you that don't know, the Instagram algorithm is basically the numbers and dots and the coding that allows Instagram to take the content you've created, that content you have spent months and months creating maybe, and it puts it into the world, and it decides how many people actually get to see it if they are not directly searching for you. So it can definitely be a great tool in our tool belt if we know how to control it, and it can be a real nail in our tool belt if we don't know how to control it and we're sort of just guessing at how to beat the algorithm. So on today's episode, we are going to get into, first of all, we're going to talk about what the algorithm is, and we're actually going to talk about how it is a good thing and something you should embrace rather than be afraid of. So we're going to talk about that, but then also I have 10 different tips and tricks on how you can, I don't want to say beat the algorithm, but how you can work with the algorithm and allow it to work in your favor. Because at the end of the day, Instagram is a company and they also have a bottom line. So basically, the tips and tricks I'm going to give you, they help Instagram get their bottom line. But more importantly, I want to give you something to take away with so that you can create a better bottom line for yourself. So we are going to talk about all that and more on tonight's episode of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and we do this podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I have been in my bathroom, currently there right now, recording these podcasts while in quarantine. Just because the world is stopping doesn't mean the content stops either. We talk about businesses, we talk about tips and tricks, we talk about quarantine and the virus and how it's impacting your marketing. If you are interested in joining this community, or if you have questions, comments, or concerns about anything we talk about on this podcast, then please reach out through social media. We're very active on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook. And again, if you want to get a hold of us, a very easy way to do that is to just write a review. But make sure you are subscribed. That way we are able just to tell who's writing the reviews, and it really does help us understand who is watching our show, and it helps us create better content for you so that you get something out of this podcast other than just entertainment. You get a little bit of value with it as well. So if you could just do me the hugest favor and subscribe, write the review, and reach out through social media, it would mean a lot to me because this podcast means a lot to me, and I would really, really love to just engage with you more. But for now, let's get back into today's episode. To start out, let's talk about what is new in the marketing world. I'd love to start out this podcast by talking about what is new in the marketing world because especially right now with everything that is going on, all of the horrible, awful things that are happening to people's companies and people's families, it's important to look at what the big companies are doing to help stop it, to get ahead of it, to take control of the situation. So I really like just starting the podcast episode with a couple of news stories that will hopefully give you a little bit of inspiration if you're dealing with a similar problem. And hopefully we'll just educate you a little bit with what is going on in the marketing world. So our first story is that Apple stores will start to reopen with temperature checks and other safeguards in place. Nearly over 100 stores have already started to open and resume services. Though the famously open retail spaces are taking on a new look in the face of a highly contagious novel virus, the coronavirus, Apple is saying that they are prepared to deal with health regulations and to keep everyone safe while visiting the store. A spokesperson from the company said, "In every store we're focused on limiting occupancy and giving everybody lots of room, and renewing our focus on one-on-one personalized service at the Genius Bar and throughout the store." A spokesperson also added that next week we'll continue on our very gradual and thoughtful reopening of U.S. stores, adding more than 25 locations in 7 states. While we know many customers are eager for their local stores to reopen, our commitment is to reopen our stores when we are confident the environment is safe. We miss our customers and we look forward to seeing them again soon. So I think this is just a super helpful reassurance coming from Apple saying, hey, we are going to reopen our stores, but don't worry, we are taking the necessary precautions to ensure that everyone is safe, everyone is well protected, and we're not just being silly about this. We are taking our time, opening them slowly. We are considering our customers first and foremost. And guys, I think if you are going to be reopening your business, this is the strategy to take. Make sure that your employees, yourself, and your customers are safe while visiting your store. And that is the best plan of action you can take if you're considering reopening your business during this end of the lockdown season. Our second news story is that Costco will be rolling back on the coronavirus 2 shopper limit. In April, Costco was only allowing 2 people in per membership card, including families with children. Now families of 3 or more may shop at Costco stores throughout the country. Those stores are still monitoring and limiting the number of people who can enter at a time. There are expectations to the policy in Kentucky and Puerto Rico, where Costco stores are only allowing 1 person in per membership. Costco is still limiting customers to 3 meat items per member in response to the country's meat shortage. Restrictions are also being imposed on return items, which are in high demand products such as toilet paper, bottled water, sanitizing wipes, paper towels, rice, and disinfectant spray. Costco will be giving first responders, medical workers priority access above all else, and reusable bags for transporting purchases will be allowed in stores unless there are local restrictions in place. So again, another really great story, very similar to the Apple one, but things are starting to open back up. Costco is obviously rolling out a lot of new regulations, but they're also kind of loosening the reins a little bit. I think a lot of you will remember this, but Costco was definitely one of the very restricted areas during this entire lockdown. They had very strict rules in place, and for a good reason. And so it is really great to see that they are still being cautious. They are still considering everybody's needs, but a part of considering everyone's needs are loosening the reins when they need to be loosened, but keeping certain rules in place. I definitely do appreciate that now you can bring in reusable bags again, but if it is unsafe overall to, again, the workers, the company, or the patrons of Costco, then again, that rule should be removed. And I think Costco is taking all of this very, very seriously, and they are not letting anything pass that they do not see fit. Our third news story is that these restaurants will be among the first to open at Disney Springs when Disney Springs are reopening later this month. Disney Springs will start accepting guests again for the first time in months as the phased reopening of shopping and dining districts begin on Wednesday. Walt Disney World officials announced the news on May 7th that the visitors should expect reduced hours, parking, and capacity in order to implement social distancing guidelines meant to stop the spread of the disease. Guests will also notice increased cleaning and sanitation, cast members wearing facial coverings and limited contact at guest services, and on the Walt Disney World website, a COVID-19 liability disclaimer has been posted ahead of the reopening. A spokesperson from the company said that we have taken enhanced health and safety measures for you, our other guests, and cast members. You must follow all posted instructions while visiting the Walt Disney World Resort. An inherent risk of exposure to COVID-19 exists in any public place where people are present. COVID-19 is an extremely contagious disease that can lead to severe illness and death. According to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, senior citizens and guests with underlying medical conditions are especially vulnerable. By visiting Walt Disney World Resort, you voluntarily assume to all risk related to exposure of COVID-19. So, again, a third company, but definitely one of the biggest companies. They are starting to reopen. Obviously, that comes with a lot of rules in place, and this is just an example of Disney, I think, covering themselves and ensuring that they are safe and that people are aware of the risks that they are taking when they visit the Walt Disney World parks. So very interesting, and three great stories, all very similar to each other. I would love to hear your thoughts on how these three companies, we got Costco, Apple, and Disney, are all handling their reopening. In a lot of ways, there's a ton of similarities in how they're handling it, but there are also a lot of differences. So please write it in the review down below, your thoughts, your questions, and concerns, and let's get a conversation going. Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and take a short break, but when we come back, we are going to talk about, one, what the algorithm is, and we'll start dipping into some of those tips and tricks on how you can work with the Instagram algorithm. So stay tuned for all of that, because you're listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast covers everything tech. The hottest mobile phones, tablets, games. We review it, rate it, test it. Whether you're Microsoft or Apple, Android or iPhone, we'll give it to you again and again. Black and white. the Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and on tonight's episode of the podcast, we are talking about the Instagram algorithm. So to start out, let's talk about what the Instagram algorithm is. At the top of the podcast, I described it a little bit, but we are going to get into the 4-step process that happens when you post an image on Instagram. So you have spent weeks taking photos, writing captions, deciding when the best time would be to post an image based on your audience data. And finally, you're like, all right, it is time for me to post right on schedule. I am going to do this. And you post. And the photo only gets 4 likes. You're probably wondering why, what did I do wrong? Why does the Instagram algorithm hate me? Why does Instagram as a company hate me? When the truth is, Instagram as a company doesn't even know you exist. They do not hate you. And again, the algorithm does not hate you. The algorithm is not working against you. All the algorithm is doing is trying to create a business for Instagram. So they are not trying to make enemies out of anyone. They are not trying to boost other people up. What they are doing is looking for content that will allow Instagram to gain in popularity and will help Instagram's bottom line. So now what is Instagram's bottom line? Instagram wants people to stay on their site longer than they already are. So which posts do you think they are going to post or bump up in the algorithm more often? They are going to utilize posts on Instagram that are keeping people on the site longer. So there are a few different ways you can do that, and again, we're going to get into that in a minute. But for now, let's talk about what happens. There is a 4-stage process when you post that photo on Instagram. So again, you have spent the time editing, writing, and copying, and you post it. The first thing it will do is Instagram will send your content to your most engaged audience members. When they open their Instagram app, they will see your photo. And I'm sure a lot of you, names just popped into your head as to who watches your videos the most, who's always commenting, who's always sharing, who's always saving. So it is going to show it to them first. And if those, we'll go ahead and say 100 people all share it, all like it, all comment on it, or interact with it in some way, then Instagram is going to push it. The Instagram algorithm is going to push it to this second step, which means it is going to your second most engaged audience members. So those are the people who, if they're scrolling by and they happen to see your post, 50% chance they might stop. We can go a little bit higher and say 60 or 70%, but they are not continuously interacting with your content. You'll see them in your DMs every now and then, but you know that they are not one of your most active audience members. But if they interact with this post, if they're commenting on it, if they're liking it, if they're spending a long time reading it, even if they're not liking it or commenting on it, they're still interacting with it. So if they do that, it will get pushed into this third step. And the third step is more of your least engaged audience members. These are people who simply just follow you, but they have never liked a photo, they have never commented, and you're not really even sure why they follow you or if they ever see your posts. So if they like it, if they comment on it, if they interact with it, then it gets moved into the fourth and the final step, which is where it goes onto the explore page, it goes to the top of the hashtag page, it gets pushed into people who aren't even following you. This is where you really start to work with the algorithm. It is going to help you gain new followers, have new people interacting with your content, and boost up your numbers. So there is definitely a lot of different ways you can interact with that algorithm. But the main takeaway is that you need to get those 3 stages of people to interact with your content. So now that we know what the algorithm is, let's get into how you can work with the audience. So the first thing you need to do is post content you know your audience already loves. And I'm talking about that step one, that first engaged audience. Those people who are always liking your stuff, who are always sharing your content. But we also know there have been a few times that we have posted something that they clearly didn't like, and you were maybe confused because it got way less likes than it normally does, and it's not like you get a lot of likes to begin with, but why didn't this one? So make sure you really take time before you start on this algorithm journey and take a look at what your audience is already responding to. Take a look at your most liked post. Take a look at the post with the most comments, and then create ideas for how you can continue posting content that you know that audience already loves. That way you can get through step one as easy as pie. The second thing you can do, like we talked about, the main thing Instagram wants and the main thing the Instagram algorithm wants is for people to stay on Instagram longer. How can you make people stay on Instagram longer? You can try microblogging. So for those of you that don't know, microblogging is basically blogging in your Instagram caption. It is a very easy, helpful, and great way to beat the algorithm, but also get your content out there. So you've all seen a really common world in which they do it is the health and fitness world. You will see a post from a girl who is in terrific shape, and she'll have a eye-catching first line, which is a tip for you. You need an eye-catching first line, and it'll say the top 5 foods that make me sick. And then you have to click read more, and she'll have it all listed out in 5 different paragraphs, the food that makes her sick. So a few things you can do to really enhance your microblogging is, again, that first eye-catching line. Now, there are a few different ones you can do. You can do the food that makes me sick, or top 5 places I've loved to travel, top 10 things to do with our new kind of soap, top 3 different coffee places to try in Seattle. So if you really start interacting with people in that first line, it will make them want to read your entire microblog. And then once you do that, the most important thing you need to do is make it look good. You almost need to make it look good before you need the content to actually be good. Because if it doesn't look good, people aren't clicking on it to begin with, so you just wasted a bunch of time. A few ways you can make it look good is to make sure you are using line breaks. Now, you have probably tried to use line breaks before, and you're like, every time I hit post, all the line breaks I made just go away and it's one giant paragraph. Here's a hot tip I learned. If you're putting a space after your period and then hitting enter, it's not going to recognize the enter. It's going to just mush it all together. So go through your post, delete that extra space, and then hit post, and it'll create really nice line breaks. Something else that people do is at the top of every point that they do. So again, if you're doing 5 foods that make me sick, then at every point that you do, you put a number like 0.1, but also you put a little star emoji or a little fruit emoji or just a color block. That way people can visually see what the points are without having to look at the number 1 or start reading the microblog right away. So those are just 3 different things you can do to ensure that people are actually reading your microblog. And again, a microblog is tip number 2 for how you can work with the algorithm, because if people are stopping on your page and they are reading your microblog, then that means your most engaged audience is going to comment on it, they are going to share it, they are going to work with it, and it will go to your second group of audience members. And then if they do it, it'll go to the third and the fourth, and Instagram will love you because you're making so many people stay on their site longer than they would have if you just wrote one line of a caption. Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, I have the rest of the tips for you on how you can start working with the algorithm on Instagram. So stay tuned for that, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and on tonight's episode of the podcast, we are talking about the Instagram algorithm and how you can make it work for you. So before the break, we went over what it is, the stages of the algorithm, and I started telling you 2 different tips on how you can work with the algorithm. Now that you are back, I have more tips and tricks for you on how you can keep people on your page, grow your following, and work with the algorithm to overall help you and your bottom line. That's what I want to do here. I want to help you sell more coffee or more soap or more toothbrushes. Whatever it may be, I want to help. So let's jump right back in with tip number 3. Your post, your content needs to add value. So we talked about microblogging right before the break, and basically microblogging is when you write a little mini piece or a little mini story, a little mini blog, basically a microblog on your captions rather than just writing 1 or 2 lines or quoting a book or something like that. But here's the thing, if you're microblogging but you're blogging about things nobody really cares about, it's not going to add value to the site. People are going to stop reading your microblog, and the algorithm is going to stop pushing your content forward. So whatever you write, whatever your microblog is, make sure that it adds value to your audience. Now here's a few different prompts for you that will help you start on your microblog journey. And some of them are just super simple. You'll know immediately what you need to write. And some of them might take a little bit more consideration, but all of them will add value to your audience's content or to your audience's wheelhouse. So number 1, a how-to. Again, if you make soap, I love using soap as an example because it's just so universal. I don't think anyone who listens to the podcast actually makes soap, but I'm sure you're all like, yeah, that works for my company too, so don't worry about it. If you want me to start using a different example, please tell me. Write it in the review. Reach out through social media. Give me a new example to use. But for now, let's keep with soap. So your first prompt is how to, and you sell soap. So how to decorate your home for the holidays using decorative soap. 5 different ways, and then you can list out the 5 different ways. Or how to make sure your hands are extremely clean during the coronavirus, and then you can write out the 5 different ways and mention your product and how your product interacts with the 5 different ways. The second one is reasons why. So if you sell coffee, then you could do top 10 reasons why Seattle loves our coffee. Top 10 reasons why I think growing beans organically is important. Top 5 ways to make your coffee more interesting in the morning, and so on and so on. The third one is try this. So if you make deodorant, try this new aluminum-free deodorant. Try this travel hack for when you need to pack your deodorant. Try this new scent of deodorant we just got, and then you can list out all the ingredients that go into this new scent. And finally, the fourth one is I hate or I love. So this one really goes hand in hand with that fitness journey world or that travel world. But I'm telling you, it can work for any product you sell. It's just more common in those ones. But basically, top 10 things I hate about traveling to New York. But it could also be top 10 things I hate about buying generic brand coffee. Top 10 things I hate about toothbrushes that aren't electric. Or top 10 things I love about toothbrushes that aren't electric. And so on and so on. So these are basically just different ways for you to engage with your audience and add value to your microblog and add value to your Instagram page. The fourth thing you need to do is you need to have a call to action. Now, you need to have a call to action whether you are microblogging or you are just writing 2 or 3 lines in your caption. And it needs to be something that starts a conversation with your audience. It needs to be something they actually want to talk about. Ask them what their stress reliever is. Ask them what kind of soap they currently use. Ask them what they were doing today during the lockdown. Ask them how much water they drink during a day. Just try to start a conversation. Now, the call to action still needs to be related to your post, but it does not directly need to be related to your company or your brand or what you are trying to sell. You don't need to be like, comment, and subscribe, because although that is a call to action, you don't want to do that every single time you post, because people aren't going to always like, comment, and subscribe, but they will always respond to what's your favorite kind of soap to smell? What's your favorite kind of soap to use in the shower versus the tub? People want to interact with you if they feel like they are adding value to your post, to your content. Number 5, engage with your audience in the comments. So after you post your post, after you write your microblog, after there's a call to action there, don't just hit and run. Don't just post and leave and then never touch Instagram again for the rest of the day. This is something that I am so guilty for doing, but trust me, you're going to want to stick around and engage with your audience in the comments. If they post what their favorite scent is in the shower versus the tub for your soap, tell them what yours is. Comment back. Don't just like it. Don't just smile to yourself and then put your phone away. Interact back with them. They are looking to start a conversation. They are looking to build a relationship. And because of that, if you interact with them, they are going to feel like they are a part of a community rather than just an audience member who is getting fed content. So it's really important, and by far one of the most important tips I can give you is to ensure that you are engaging with your audience in the comments directly after you post for at least an hour to 30 minutes, or make sure you're always interacting with them. If you see someone comment on something months later, go over there and at least like it. I'm not saying you have to have a full conversation with them if it has been months, but chances are maybe they just found your page, maybe they are a new customer, so you're always going to want to make sure you are welcoming people to your community with open arms and that they are excited to be there because you are excited to have them there. Okay, everyone, we are going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, I have the rest of our tips for how you can work with the Instagram algorithm. So stay tuned for that, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
Are you a business owner? Someone interested in the latest news that might affect your business? Then check out the GSMC Business News Podcast, a show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. The GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and on tonight's episode, we are talking about Instagram's algorithm. So we've already went through what that algorithm is and a few different tips and tricks on how you can work with it. And I'm going to get into the rest. We have 5 more for you. But guys, the most important thing is to remember that the algorithm is there for you, and it's there for Instagram. It is not trying to defeat your dreams of becoming a famous Instagram influencer. It is not trying to push you down into the depths of Instagram. It really is there to try to create a more engaging place for audience members. So all the tips we've talked about so far are ways to create value for your Instagram followers, which is so important, and it is something people forget all the time. Something else people always forget is to subscribe to the GSMC Marketing Podcast. Do you like how I slipped in there, just slipped that in? Guys, if there is anyone who is so committed to creating amazing content that I hope actually adds value to you, it is this podcast. I want this podcast to add genuine value to your marketing, to your life, even if it's just as a form of entertainment. But I can only do that. I can only help if I know a little bit more about you and what I'm helping you with and what you like and what you don't like about the podcast. So please take a minute. I'll wait. Take a minute, subscribe to the podcast, and then write a review down below. While I'm waiting for you to subscribe and write your review down below, I'm also going to mention that if you love this podcast, you might also love the other GSMC podcasts that are on the network. We have sports, we have entertainment, we have social media, we have books and beauty and all the things. We have so much content out there, all of it that adds value, because I know the hosts, just like me, are all so committed to bringing you quality content on a regular basis. We're always here. We're always creating content, and we really do want to engage with you. So please engage with us, rate, comment, and review, and let me know what other podcasts you really like on the network, or hey, let me know if I'm your favorite. I would love to hear that. All right, but for now, let's jump back into tonight's podcast, and what I would love to do is just quickly review the 5 tips and tricks we have already been over, and then we'll get into the rest of the list. But the first one is to post content you know your audience already loves. So again, the first step in the algorithm is to send your post, your content, to the group of people who always interact with your content. And if they like it, if they stamp approval on it, it'll get sent to the next group, and then the next group, and the next group, and eventually it'll get sent to a group of people who don't follow you at all, and hopefully you will gain new followers. But the only way to do that is to post content that you know that first group of people will genuinely love. Our second tip is to microblog. And 3 different ways you can improve your microblogging is to make sure you have an eye-catching first line, something that makes people want to click see more and then read the rest of your post. The second thing you need to do is have line breaks. You need something that visually separates all the different points you are trying to make. Again, you can do that with an emoji, you can do it with numbers, but the best thing you can do is to create an actual line break by putting a space and an enter after each one. Tip, if you are noticing that it is coming out like one big blurry paragraph, then make sure you don't have a space after your period before you hit enter. Trust me on that. The third thing you need to do is you need to add value. It is not enough if you are just microblogging. Your microblogs need to add genuine value to your audience, otherwise they will not read it. The fourth thing you need to do is make sure every post has a call to action. This way you can start up a conversation that will lead to you being able to engage and interact with your audience, which is tip number 5. Make sure you're engaging with your audience in the comment section so that you can start to build a community and network with these people, and they will feel as though they are a part of something. So let's continue on with our list. Number 6, pick a niche. So many companies, so many brands, so many influencers make the mistakes of trying to be everything for everyone. You can't. You can't be a food blogger and a travel blogger and also do fashion. You can have interest in all of those things, but if you truly want to grow your following and work with the algorithm, you need to pick a niche. You need to pick a topic. A way to do this is to really hone in on what your brand is. Pick your brand colors, pick your brand aesthetic, and then focus solely on that. If you're curious as to what some of the other niches are that people use, there are yoga, travel, comedy, beauty, and lifestyle brands that people tend to lean on in the Instagram world. I am not saying you have to be one of those to work with the algorithm, but those definitely are the most common. Number 7, establish a theme. So a theme on your Instagram account, right now if everyone goes and looks at mine, Mackenzie_Jakewish, you will notice that my theme is yellow. And what do I mean by yellow? It doesn't mean that every post I post is just a block of yellow. What it does mean is that every post or every other post has the same shade of yellow incorporated into it. Or all of the photos are edited using the similar colors. They have matching tones. I've clearly used the same filter on them. And it clearly took me some time and commitment and effort to plan out my feed. Because a post is important. But if you want someone to actually follow you, they're going to have to click on your feed and then want to follow you based off of the feed, not just based off of that one post. So make sure that your feed has a solid theme. And again, you can use this using your branding, and just make sure you stick to your branding rules and your branding guidelines when creating your theme. That way everything is very cohesive, everything looks good together, and people will feel as if they are all part of one genuine brand rather than someone who is just trying to get likes and comments. So one of the ways you can plan out your content in advance is with programs like Panoli. Panoli allows you to plan out your content ahead of time. This way you are able to see what your grid is going to look like without having to post anything on Instagram. Tip number 8, utilize Instagram TV. Like we talked about before, your main goal to work with the algorithm is to have people on Instagram longer. What's longer than Instagram TV? So create a video, link to it through your profile, and ensure that people are watching your videos, commenting, and interacting with them in the same way they're interacting with your content. This way Instagram has more views, and they're going to allow the algorithm to push you further because you're creating content that makes people stay on their site for longer, and you're using one of their favorite features because they talk about it all the time, Instagram TV. Number 9, as well as you should be utilizing Instagram TV, you should also be utilizing Instagram stories. So when you utilize Instagram stories, make sure you are doing it every single day. You may not post every single day, but make sure you are posting on Instagram stories every single day, and use all of the features that are available to you on there. Use GIFs, use polls, use questions, use your location, your geotag, use hashtags. Just make sure you are really using a wide variety of your Instagram features. That way people aren't just interacting with your post, they are also interacting with your story. And finally, guys, tip number 10, keep going. It is going to be tough for a little while to work with the algorithm, but the only way to do it is to push yourself, push your brand, and push your company to ensure that your content is getting out there, because the algorithm can't work with you if you're not posting anything. So keep going, keep trying, and keep working. Okay, everyone, that is it for tonight's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and thank you so much for listening. Before you go, please subscribe, rate, comment, and review. It means so much to me, and I promise I will read the reviews. I will be here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with new episodes of the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I will be seeing you next time.
You've been listening to the GSMC Marketing News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to any podcast app, and you'll find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news, you'll find it all on the GSMC Podcast Network. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.